Hi there, 7th graders. This is American History, Chapter 14, Section 1. I will be reading aloud 444 to 449. This is about the Oregon Country. First off, our guide to reading. Main idea: beginning in the early 1800s, Americans started settling the nation's vast western territory. We'll discover in this section today what nations had conflicting claims to Oregon country, and how traders and trappers paved the way for western expansion. The grizzly bear stood so close, Hugh Glass could smell it. With a steady finger, the fur trapper fired his musket. As the bullet struck the animal, the bear hurled himself into Glass. Another trapper described what happened next. The bear caught him and hauled him to the ground, tearing and lacerating his body at a fearful rate. Glass not only survived, he continued to hunt grizzly bear and other animals in the Oregon country. The adventures of fur trappers like Hugh Glass soon caught the attention of other people who wanted to claim more than the region's fur-bearing animals. They came to capture the land itself. Hugh Glass, gosh, he was just tough as nails. What a strong, courageous man. Settlers move west. The Oregon country included the present-day states of Oregon, Washington, Idaho, and parts of Wyoming, Montana, and Canada. The Rocky Mountains bounded the region on the east, while the Pacific Ocean hemmed it on the west. Within the Oregon country, climates and vegetation varied. Lands west of the coastal mountains, called the Cascades, enjoyed mild temperatures and abundant rainfall. On the east side of the mountains, however, the landscape changed dramatically. The Cascades prevented the rain-bearing clouds that rolled off the Pacific from heading inland. As a result, a dry plateau sprawled eastward from the Cascades to the Rockies. For the non-Native Americans who first set foot in the Oregon country, its wealth lay in its fur-bearing animals. For centuries, fashionable Europeans and North Americans wore hats made of beaver pelts. To meet the demand, fur trappers exhausted the supply of beaver in one stream after another. By the early 1800s, a few adventurous trappers plunged across the Mississippi River in search of new forests to hunt. Trappers often traveled trails blazed by the Native Americans. Groups that lived in the Oregon country included the Cayuses, Yakimas, Chinooks, Nez Perce, and Blackfeet. Most had deep ancestral roots in the region, even as Europeans and Americans refused to recognize Native American rights to the land. Instead, they labeled the lands a wilderness and freely staked their claims. Conflicting claims. 4 nations, Russia, Spain, Great Britain, and the United States, tried to take control of the Oregon country. Of these nations, Great Britain and the United States pursued their claims most actively. The British based their claims in Oregon country on the explorations of Sir Francis Drake and George Vancouver. Drake visited the coast of Oregon in 1579. A member of Vancouver's crew navigated a river part of the way through Oregon in 1792. Fort Vancouver, the only permanent British outpost in Oregon, took its name from this expedition. The U.S. based its claims on the voyages of Robert Gray. In 1792, this New England sea captain gave the Columbia River its name. In 1805, the Lewis and Clark expedition reached the mouth of this river and strengthened the United States' claims to this area. By 1807, American fur traders had set up scattered trading posts along Lewis and Clark's route. They had to compete with British traders who pushed into Oregon from Canada. American fur trader John Jacob Astor sent a shipload of supplies and workers around the southern tip of South America in 1811. The workers built a trading post near the mouth of the Columbia River. Here they set up Astoria, the first American settlement on the Pacific coast. Although Astoria only lasted a short time, it gave Americans another claim to Oregon. Agreement with Great Britain. In 1818, Great Britain and the United States agreed to share the Oregon country for 10 years. Under the agreement, British and American citizens would enjoy equal rights. With few settlers in the region, Spain and Russia gave up their claims in 1825. The Mountain Men. Both British and American fur trading companies rushed to secure their claims to the Oregon country. In 1822, one American company advertised for enterprising young men to sign up for work. More than 100 people, Scots, Germans, Spaniards, New Englanders, Southerners, and African Americans, responded to the ad. Some hired on as camp keepers, others who cooked and Some hired on as camp keepers, people who cooked and guarded the camp. Others took jobs as trappers. From their ranks came a rough and tumble group of explorers known as the Mountain Men. Life of a Mountain Man. The Mountain Man lived a tough, lonely life. Aside from the clothes on his back, he traveled with little more than a possible sack. Inside this small leather pouch, a mountain man carried all he might possibly need: an awl for stitching leather, a mold for making lead musket balls, and a surgeon's lance for digging out bullets. During the spring trapping season, a mountain man might haul 6 to 8 heavy iron traps on his back. To set the traps, he waded into bone-chilling streams. When game was in short supply, he went to bed hungry. One band of trappers ate nothing but roots for 10 days. Mountain men learned many of their trapping skills and survival methods from Native Americans, especially from the Native American women they married. In the summer, trappers' spirits soared as they headed to a meeting place called the Rendezvous. They met traders from Missouri who brought their furs and charged high sums of money for supplies. But most trappers shrugged off the high prices. They just wanted to have a good time. These men are chock full of brag and fight, chuckled Mountain Man Joe Meek. Because mountain streams froze between October and March, trappers gathered in winter camps of up to 60 men. During the day they hunted. In the evening, they huddled around fires in buffalo hide lodges, spinning long yarns, tales, until midnight. You can imagine they were probably quite the storytellers. Blazing a path for others. The epic journeys of the mountain men opened the door for settlement of the West. An African-American mountain man, James Beckwourth, discovered a pass, or an opening, through the Sierra Nevada mountains into California. Jim Bridger first strode across the Great Divide, the name given to the Rocky Mountains. Jedediah Smith brought back colorful accounts of the geysers and boiling springs of what is now Yellowstone National Park. Manuel Lisa, a Spanish-American trapper, led a trip up the Missouri River in 1807. He founded Fort Manuel, the first outpost on the upper Missouri River. To explore unknown regions was their chief delight, wrote a clerk in one fur trading company. By exploring unknown regions, the mountain men surveyed paths for the pioneers who would soon follow. End of an era. The mountain men recognized changes were coming when the covered wagons began showing up in their camps. In 1836, 2 missionary couples, Marcus and Narcissa Whitman, and Henry and Eliza Spaulding, arrived at the annual rendezvous. Narcissa and Eliza became the first non-Native American women to cross the Rocky Mountains. The 2 couples came to set up missions among the Cayuses. The Whitmans chose to build their settlement on a site where the Snake and Columbia rivers meet. In letters to friends and family, the Whitmans encouraged others to emigrate or move to Oregon. Troubles with Native Americans, though, cost the Whitmans their lives. In 1847, measles spread to Cayuse children at the mission. The epidemic claimed the lives of both non-Native Americans and Cayuse children. The Cayuses blamed the intruders for the disease. They attacked and killed the Whitmans and 12 others. News of the Whitmans' deaths, however, did not stop settlers from pouring into the region. As settlers arrived, a change in fashion ended the way of life for the mountain men. In the late 1830s and 1840s, people stopped wearing beaver hats. Within a few years, the mountain men found themselves out of work. Some turned to farming in the rich valleys of the Pacific Northwest. Others became guides for the wagon trains. The route they knew best, the Oregon Trail, soon became a major highway across the continent. The Oregon Trail extended from Independence, Missouri, to the Columbia River in Oregon. Oregon fever. Emigrants only trickled into Oregon until reports made their way back east and stories grew into tall tales. One rumor claimed that pigs roamed about pre-cooked for anyone who might be hungry. Other rumors described turnips 5 feet in diameter and wheat 6 feet tall. Some tall tales. Stories like these sparked an outbreak of Oregon fever. Between 1840 and 1860, more than 60,000 people traveled the Oregon Trail. Even today, the ruts carved by their wagons scar parts of the Great Plains. Traveling the Oregon Trail. The journey west began at jumping-off places like Independence, Missouri. Here families stocked their lightweight covered wagons, known as prairie schooners, and hitched them to teams of oxen. Several families then formed a wagon train. Each wagon train elected a leader to make decisions on the trail. Most wagon trains left Independence in May. By then, enough spring grass covered the plains to feed their oxen. The emigrants had 5 months to cross the Rockies. If they arrived later, they might freeze to death in blinding blizzards. Once on the trail, the wagons rolled each day at dawn. As the oxen crawled along at 2 miles an hour, the leader cried out, "Catch up! Catch up!" Near dusk, the men began scouting for water and grass. When they found both, they drew the wagons into a circle. While the livestock grazed, excuse me, and the men stood guard, the women fried bacon and baked biscuits over fires fueled with buffalo chips, dried manure. When the wagons hit deep rivers or steep mountains, families had to lighten their loads. So they dumped barrels, plows, clothing, trunks, spades, and anything else that slowed them down. Other emigrants helped themselves to the discards. One man camped beside an old stove and baked some bread. Others picked up books, read them, and then tossed them back on the ground, into the prairie library. The travelers helped one another by using the roadside telegraph, messages left on boards, rocks, tree trunks, and even animal skulls beside the trail. Many immigrants owed their lives to these warnings about dead-end shortcuts or poison water holes. Hardships and heartache. Hundreds of travelers never reached Oregon. Some turned back or settled on the plains. Many died of diseases such as cholera and smallpox. Still others drowned in swollen rivers or died in accidents. Graves and the carcasses of dead animals lined the trail. Wrote one weary traveler, "It is a hardship without glory, to be sick without a home, to die and be buried like a dog on the plains." Native Americans. For the most part, Native Americans traded with the travelers and tried to lessen their misery. Native Americans provided travelers with horses, clothing, and fresh food. Some Native Americans fed hungry wagon trains or guided them over difficult stretches along the trail. Settlers had been led to believe that Native American groups posed a threat to those crossing the plains